I was sanding the edge of a maple cutting board when I noticed Derek standing in the doorway of my workshop. My nephew thought I was too focused on my work to see him slip something into my vintage tool chest, the one I'd inherited from my father. He moved quickly, carefully, his hands shaking slightly as he closed the lid. When he turned around and saw me looking up, he smiled, that same easy grin he'd had since he was a boy. "Hey, Uncle Tom, just looking for that drill bit you mentioned." But I hadn't mentioned any drill bit, and Derek's hands were empty. "My name is Thomas Brennan. I'm 67 years old, and I spent 36 years teaching high school English in Edmonton before I retired. These days, I spend most of my time in the workshop behind my house, turning wood into something useful. It's quieter than a classroom full of teenagers, and the only drama comes from grain patterns that don't cooperate, or at least that's how it used to be. Derek is my sister Patricia's son. She passed away from cancer 4 years ago, and since then, Derek and I had stayed close. He'd come over for Sunday dinners, help me with projects, talk about his business ideas. He was always starting something new, always convinced the next venture would be the one that took off. Mobile apps, cryptocurrency trading, a protein shake subscription service. None of them quite worked out, but he kept trying. I admired that about him. 3 months ago, Derek showed up at my door with 2 suitcases and a defeated look I'd never seen before. His latest startup had collapsed, taking his savings with it. His girlfriend had left. He needed a place to stay, just for a few weeks, while he figured things out. "Of course," I'd said immediately. "Your mother would want me to help you." He'd moved into the spare bedroom upstairs. The first few weeks were good. We'd worked together in the shop, and Derek seemed to be getting his feet back under him. He mentioned job interviews, sending out resumes. But then I started noticing things. My prescription medications were running out faster than they should. I take pills for blood pressure, cholesterol, the usual collection for a man my age. Nothing serious, just maintenance. But twice now, I'd gone to refill a prescription, only to find I was out earlier than expected. "You're probably forgetting when you take them, Uncle Tom," Derek had said when I mentioned it. "It happens. You're getting older. I'm 67, not 90. My mind is sharp. I still do the crossword every morning, still remember my students' names from 20 years ago." But Derek's comment planted a seed of doubt. Was I forgetting? Then, 2 weeks ago, I found the empty bottles. I'd been taking out the recycling when I noticed them at the bottom of the bin in the garage. Prescription bottles with my name on them, but for medications I'd never taken. Oxycodone, hydromorphone, strong painkillers. The dates on the labels were from the past month. Someone had been getting prescriptions filled in my name. Someone with access to my health card. I stood there in my garage, holding those empty bottles, and felt my stomach drop. I thought about Derek's recent behavior. The way he'd started suggesting I was forgetting things. The odd hours he kept. Leaving the house at strange times. How thin he'd gotten. How his eyes looked different. I didn't want to believe it. This was Patricia's son. The boy who used to help me build birdhouses. Who called me when he graduated university. But I'm a teacher. I've seen addiction before. Seen how it changes people into strangers wearing familiar faces. I needed to know for sure. The next morning, while Derek was supposedly at a job interview, I went into his room. I'm not proud of invading his privacy, but those empty bottles had kept me awake all night. What I found confirmed my worst fears. In his desk drawer, underneath some papers, I found printouts, articles about cognitive decline in seniors, information about obtaining power of attorney for elderly relatives, a handwritten note with a lawyer's phone number, and the words conservatorship consultation, $200. My hands shook as I read through them. Derek wasn't just stealing my medications. He was planning something bigger. I sat on his bed, trying to process what this meant. If Derek could convince a court I was mentally incompetent, he could get control of my finances. My pension, my savings, this house. Everything I'd worked for over 4 decades of teaching. And then I'd be exactly what he was trying to prove I was. Helpless, dependent, unable to protect myself. I heard Derek's car pull into the driveway. I quickly put everything back exactly as I'd found it, went downstairs, and pretended to be reading the newspaper when he came in. "How was the interview?" I asked. "Good, good. They said they'd call next week. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I'm going to rest for a bit. After he went upstairs, I sat in my living room and thought about what to do. I couldn't confront him directly, not yet. If he knew I was on to him, he might accelerate whatever plan he had. I needed evidence, something concrete. Then I remembered the security cameras. I'd installed them in the workshop 6 months ago, after there'd been a string of garage break-ins in the neighborhood. Nothing fancy, just basic cameras that recorded to a hard drive in my office. They covered the entire workshop, including the wall where I kept my tool chest. I went to my office and pulled up the footage from earlier that morning. I watched Derek enter the workshop, look around to make sure I wasn't there, and open my tool chest. He pulled out a small plastic bag filled with pills, slipped them into his jacket pocket. Then he pulled out another bag from his other pocket and placed it carefully into the chest, tucking it behind my father's old handplane. I rewound and watched it again. Then I fast-forwarded through the past few weeks of footage. Again and again. Derek entering the workshop when I was out, taking pills from his hiding spot in my tool chest, sometimes adding new bags. But why hide them in my workshop? If he was stealing my medications to feed an addiction, why not keep them in his room? Unless he wasn't planning to keep them there permanently. I thought about those printouts about conservatorship, about how he kept suggesting I was forgetful, and suddenly I understood. Derek was going to discover drugs in my possession. He'd express concern about my behavior, my forgetfulness, and suggest I needed help. Maybe he'd even tip off the authorities, play the worried nephew trying to help his elderly uncle who'd developed a drug problem. Between the pills and the alleged cognitive decline, he'd have grounds to petition for conservatorship. He wouldn't even need to prove I was taking them, just that they were in my possession, that I was a danger to myself. It was actually brilliant, in a horrifying way. And I'd walked right into it by letting him move in, by trusting him. I spent that evening making copies of the camera footage, uploading it to cloud storage, emailing it to myself. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I called an old colleague, Margaret Chen, who used to teach social studies at my school before she retired. Margaret had spent her career before teaching, working as a social worker, and she'd dealt with plenty of cases involving elder abuse and fraud. "Tom," she said after I explained everything, "you need to be very careful here. If Derek's struggling with addiction, he's not thinking clearly. People do desperate things. What should I do? Document everything. The missing medications, the footage, those printouts, and you should get a cognitive assessment done. Officially. If this goes to court, you'll want medical proof that there's nothing wrong with your mental capacity. I'm not incompetent, Margaret. I know that. But you'll need a doctor to say it on paper. Can you see your physician without Derek knowing?" The next day, I scheduled an appointment with Dr. Patel, my family doctor. I'd been seeing him for 15 years, and I trusted him. I explained the situation, showed him the footage on my phone. He was quiet for a long time. "Tom, I'm going to be honest with you. This is serious. Not just the fraud attempt, but Derek clearly needs help. Those medications he's taking, the oxycodone especially, that's a dangerous path. I know. But right now, I need to protect myself first." Dr. Patel conducted a thorough cognitive assessment, memory tests, problem-solving tasks, the works. When he was finished, he printed out a formal letter stating that I showed no signs of cognitive impairment, that my mental capacity was completely intact for my age. "Keep this somewhere safe," he said. "And Tom, be careful. Addiction makes people unpredictable." That was a week ago. Since then, I'd been watching Derek carefully, pretending everything was normal while I waited to see what he'd do next. This morning, everything came to a head. I was in the workshop, actually working on that cutting board, when Derek came in with a woman I'd never met. "Uncle Tom, this is Jennifer Winters. She's a social worker with Alberta Health Services." I looked up from my work, my heart suddenly pounding. "Oh? What's this about?" The woman smiled professionally. "Mr. Brennan, your nephew contacted us with some concerns about your well-being. This is just a routine wellness check. Nothing to worry about." Derek wouldn't meet my eyes. "I've been worried about you, Uncle Tom. You've seemed confused lately, forgetting things. I just want to make sure you're okay." I set down my sanding block carefully. "I see. Well, I appreciate your concern, Derek. Though I have to say, I feel fine." "When was the last time you saw your doctor?" Jennifer asked, pulling out a tablet. "Last week, actually. Dr. Patel gave me a full checkup. I didn't mention the cognitive assessment. Not yet. Derek shifted his weight. But Uncle Tom, what about those times you couldn't find your keys? Or when you forgot we had plans? I looked at my nephew, this young man I'd loved since he was born, and felt a deep sadness. Derek, I think we both know what's really going on here. His face went pale. What do you mean? Miss Winters, I said, turning to the social worker. I need to show you something. Would you both come into my office? I led them inside, Derek following reluctantly. In my office, I pulled up the security camera footage on my computer. What's this? Jennifer asked. This is footage from my workshop cameras. Derek, why don't you explain to Miss Winters what you're doing in this video? We watched in silence as the footage showed Derek taking pills from the tool chest, replacing them with new bags. I fast-forwarded through several instances over the past weeks. Derek's face had gone from pale to ashen. Uncle Tom, I can explain. Can you explain these? I pulled out the printouts I'd found in his room, now photocopied. Information about conservatorship? About cognitive decline? Jennifer Winters was looking at Derek with a very different expression now. Mr. Brennan, the older Mr. Brennan, I think I need to make some calls. Derek, I'm going to need you to stay here. This isn't what it looks like, Derek said, but his voice was shaking. I was trying to help. Uncle Tom has been acting strange. You were stealing my prescription medications, I said quietly. Medications that weren't even prescribed to me. You were planning to make it look like I had a drug problem, so you could have me declared incompetent and take control of my assets. I needed the money. I owe people, Uncle Tom. You don't understand. You're right. I don't understand. I felt my voice break slightly. Your mother trusted me to look out for you, and instead of asking for help, you decided to destroy me. Jennifer was on her phone now, speaking in a low voice. Within 20 minutes, 2 RCMP officers arrived at my house. I showed them everything. The camera footage, the printouts, the empty prescription bottles I'd saved, Dr. Patel's letter confirming my cognitive health, the timeline of when Derek had moved in and when my medications started disappearing. One of the officers went to the workshop and retrieved the bags of pills from the tool chest. Derek sat on my couch, his head in his hands. Derek Brennan, the officer said, you're under arrest for fraud, theft, and possession of controlled substances. You have the right to remain silent. As they read him his rights, Derek looked at me. I'm sorry, Uncle Tom. I didn't want to hurt you. I just needed help, and I didn't know how to ask. You could have asked, I said. You could have just asked. They took him away in the RCMP cruiser. Jennifer Winters stayed behind to take my statement and provide information about resources available to me. This is more common than you'd think, she said gently. Elder financial abuse, especially by family members. You did the right thing protecting yourself. After everyone left, I sat alone in my house. The house felt different now, violated in a way that had nothing to do with the physical space. Derek had lived here for 3 months, eaten meals at my table, worked beside me in the shop, and the whole time, he'd been planning to take everything from me. I thought about my sister Patricia. What would she think if she could see this? Her son, arrested for trying to defraud her brother. The guilt washed over me. Had I failed him somehow? Should I have seen the signs of his addiction earlier, tried to help before it got this far? But then I thought about what Margaret had said. People do desperate things. And I thought about all my former students over the years. The ones who'd struggled with addiction, with making bad choices. I'd tried to help them, but ultimately, they had to want help. They had to face consequences. Derek needed consequences. Not because I didn't love him, but because I did. The legal process took several months. Derek pleaded guilty to multiple charges. The court-ordered assessment confirmed what I'd suspected, that he had developed an addiction to opioids and had gotten involved with some dangerous people who were demanding repayment for drug debts. Taking my medications had started as a way to feed his own addiction. The conservatorship plan had come later, a desperate attempt to get money to pay off what he owed. The judge sentenced him to 18 months in a rehabilitation facility, followed by probation and community service. It was lenient, considering what he'd done, but the judge acknowledged that Derek needed treatment more than punishment. I attended one of the court hearings. Derek looked different, cleaner somehow, more like the nephew I remembered. When he saw me, he mouthed the words, "I'm sorry." I nodded but didn't smile. After the sentencing, Derek's lawyer approached me. He handed me a letter. "Derek wanted you to have this," he said. I took the letter home but didn't open it for 3 days. When I finally did, it was 5 pages long, handwritten. Derek talked about how the addiction had started after his business failed, how the shame of disappointing everyone had made him vulnerable, how one of his business partners had offered him pills to help with stress, and how quickly everything had spiraled. He talked about the moment he'd decided to hide drugs in my workshop, how he'd convinced himself it was the only way out. "I know I can never make this right," he wrote. "I violated your trust in the worst possible way. I wanted you to know that what I did had nothing to do with you and everything to do with my own weakness. You deserved better from me. Mom deserved better. At the end," he wrote, "I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I'm getting help, real help this time. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to become someone worthy of the uncle who gave me a second chance, even though I used it to hurt him." I folded the letter and put it in my desk drawer. A month after the sentencing, I put my house on the market. It wasn't just about Derek. The house had become too big for me, too full of memories, both good and bad. I found a smaller place, a condo near the river, with a small workshop space in the building's common area. It felt like starting over, which was exactly what I needed. I kept one thing from the old workshop, my father's tool chest, the same one Derek had used to hide the pills. Some people might think it's strange to keep it, given what happened, but to me, it represented something important. My father had built that chest with his own hands, had taught me to respect tools, to create rather than destroy. Derek had tried to turn something good into something harmful, but the chest itself was innocent. It was just wood and metal, holding whatever someone chose to put in it. 6 months into his rehabilitation, I received another letter from Derek. This one was shorter. He was doing well in the program, had gotten his counselor certification, was helping other residents. He asked if, someday, when he was released, I might be willing to meet with him, not to reconcile necessarily, but just to talk. I haven't responded yet. I'm not sure what I'll say. Margaret Chen visits me sometimes in my new place. We have coffee and talk about the old days at the school, about her grandchildren, about anything except Derek. But one day, she asked me if I had any regrets about how I handled things. "I did what I had to do to protect myself," I said, "but I wish it hadn't been necessary." "That's the hardest part of loving someone," Margaret said. "Knowing when helping them means letting them face the consequences of their choices." I've thought about that a lot. As a teacher, I spent decades trying to help young people make better choices. But I also learned that you can't save someone who isn't ready to be saved. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step back and let them find their own way, even if it means watching them fall. Derek made his choices. He chose drugs over honesty, fraud over asking for help. Those were his decisions, not mine. My decision was to protect myself, to refuse to become a victim of someone else's addiction. That doesn't make me heartless. It makes me human. Some nights, I work in the community workshop, building things with my hands like I always have. The smell of sawdust, the satisfaction of seeing raw wood become something useful. It's still the same. The work hasn't changed, even if everything else has. I think about the future sometimes. Maybe one day I'll meet with Derek, hear what he has to say. Maybe I'll see that he's truly changed, that the person my sister raised is still in there somewhere. Or maybe I won't. Maybe the boundary I've set will stay in place, and that will have to be okay too. Because here's what I've learned. Love doesn't always look like saying yes. Sometimes love looks like saying no. Sometimes it looks like calling the police on your own nephew because he needs to face consequences more than he needs to be rescued. Sometimes it looks like protecting yourself, even from family, because you can't pour from an empty cup. I'm 67 years old. I taught high school English for 36 years, and in all that time, I learned one fundamental truth. Actions have consequences. I taught that to thousands of students. It broke my heart to have to teach it to my nephew in this way. But some lessons can't be learned any other way. Derek wrote in his letter that he hopes to become someone worthy of the uncle who gave him a second chance. But I didn't give him a second chance. The justice system did, society did, the rehabilitation program did. What I gave him was consequences. And sometimes, consequences are the greatest gift you can offer someone, even if it doesn't feel like it at the time. I hope Derek finds his way. I hope he beats his addiction, rebuilds his life, becomes the person my sister believed he could be. But whether he does or doesn't, I'll be okay. Because I chose to protect myself, to value my own well-being enough to set boundaries, even painful ones. That's what I'd tell anyone going through something similar. Your safety matters. Your well-being matters. Protecting yourself from someone you love isn't betrayal. It's survival. And there's no shame in choosing to survive. The cutting board I was working on when this all started, I finally finished it last week. Maple with a walnut inlay, sanded smooth. Finished with food-safe oil. It came out beautifully. I'm giving it to Margaret as a thank you for her support through all of this. When I handed it to her, she ran her hands over the smooth surface and smiled. "You know what I love about woodworking?" she said. "You take something rough and damaged, and with enough patience and effort, you can make it into something beautiful and useful again." "You think that's what I'm doing?" I asked. "I think that's what we're all doing, Tom. Every single day. I don't know if Derek can be sanded smooth again, if the rough edges of his addiction and his choices can be worked away to reveal something better underneath. That's his work to do, not mine. My work is simpler now. I wake up in my smaller home, I work on my projects, I have coffee with friends, I protect my peace. I've learned to recognize the difference between helping someone and letting them destroy you. It's a lesson I wish I'd never needed to learn, but I'm grateful I learned it before it was too late. If you're facing something similar, if someone you love is asking you to set yourself on fire to keep them warm, please hear this. You have the right to say no. You have the right to protect yourself. Love that requires you to sacrifice your safety, your sanity, your financial security isn't really love at all. It's manipulation, even if the person doing it doesn't fully realize it. Set your boundaries. Protect yourself. Seek help from professionals. Document everything. Trust your instincts. And know that choosing yourself doesn't make you selfish. It makes you wise. The hardest conversations we have to have are sometimes with the people we love most. But having them, setting those boundaries, standing firm, even when it breaks your heart, that's what real strength looks like. Not the strength to endure abuse, but the strength to refuse it. Derek's letter sits in my desk drawer. Maybe one day I'll respond. Maybe I'll agree to that meeting. But it won't be because I'm ready to forget what happened or pretend it didn't matter. It'll be because I've decided, on my own terms, in my own time, that it's safe to take that step. And if that day never comes, that's okay too, because I've learned that you can love someone and still choose not to have them in your life. You can wish them well from a distance. You can hope they find healing while protecting yourself from further harm. That's not cruelty. That's wisdom. And it's a lesson I'm still learning, every single day.